Good evening guys and welcome back to the FM Scout YouTube channel with me, Teach FM. Once again I am back with my mini experiment series in which we take a European top club who dominate their league consistently, take them to the Premier League and see if they can dominate there. As you can see on your screen, in today's episode we have brought Juventus to the Premier League. However, before we get stuck into this experiment, I would just like to point you in the direction of my channel where I am taking control of Manchester United. We are currently in season 4 now. We've had a lot of success, however, the Champions League is still the title that we are chasing. So if you could maybe pop by, take a view of the couple of videos, and if you enjoy what you see, maybe even consider dropping a sub, that'd be grand. The link will be in the description. So the mighty Juventus who basically dominate Serie A and have done now for a number of years. As you know, in the last few episodes we have done the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona. Bayern Munich all come into the Premier League. If you want to check those out, do check down in the videos at FM Scout, you will find them. They've always been pretty good experiments and I'm expecting the same today. So Juventus always dominate the Serie A, and the question is, could they dominate the Premier League? So if you've not seen any of these videos before, I will just take you to the registration so you can see the squad. So of course the first thing that we have done, we have of course put Juventus into the Premier League. Burnley are the team that have had to go down to the Championship, and then we've dropped a team for every single tier all the way down so that the database is working correctly. And vice versa in Italy, when we took Juventus out, we then went down through the lower leagues and promoted a team all the way up, basically just so that the database works fine. Now of course in the Premier League there are rules due to homegrown, so what we do is we go on to players and we change their second nationality to English. So for example, Dybala will of course still play for Argentina, as we can see up here. It's just the fact that his second nationality has gone to English, and we've made sure that he was trained at Juventus for 3 years, basically just so that Juventus can come to the Premier League and have a dabble at it while having full control of their team. So you know how this works by now guys. We're going to head to September the 1st, just past the first transfer window, see whether Juventus have done any business upon coming into the Premier League. Maybe they felt they might have needed to add a couple of players, and of course just see how their season started. So here we are then on September the 1st, just after the transfer windows close, and obviously that's where we're going to start. So we'll just check the transfer history, and as you can see, nobody's been brought in. They have loaned out a young lad called Mattiello to Birmingham, but that is it. No other business. So not really surprised we didn't see much business in any of the other experiments that we've done. If we're going to see anything, I would imagine it will be in the winter window in January. And if we take a look at Juventus competitions now, the first thing that is evident is that they are 9th in the Premier League. They've only played 3 games, but they've won 1, drew 1 and lost 1. The Champions League draw has been made with Shakhtar, Olympiacos and Monaco all joining Juventus in Group E. As we know, the FA Cup draw hasn't happened yet. However, in the EFL Cup, they will face Brighton in the 3rd round. So we'll take a closer look at the Premier League, because that's what the episode's all about. One thing we won't be doing in this episode, guys, is focusing on any of the English teams. We are just solely here to see how Juventus are doing. And maybe a little surprising for their bad league position, but Gonzalo Higuain is at the top of the goal scoring charts, with Bonucci sat at the top of the average rating charts also. But other than that, no other Juventus players featuring in the player charts. So as we look at the Juventus schedule, then we can see the first game they ever had in the Premier League was at home, which is of course in Turin, where they had a 1-1 draw against Crystal Palace. Maybe a little bit of a culture shock, shall we say. They then played Watford away from home, winning 2-0. Before having a home tie against Arsenal, which they lost 2-1. So at the moment we can't judge anything. It's only 3 games into the season. They're obviously just finding their feet, but it will get interesting when we get past the January transfer window, which is where we're going to head now. So as we head to the end of the January transfer window, we are of course on February the 1st, and the first thing I noticed is the fact that Emery is now in charge. So obviously it's not gone too well. Juventus has sat in 7th. Allegri's been moved on. And yeah, I think I'm a little bit shocked by that. Not only did I expect Juventus to come in and do quite well, I certainly didn't think that they'd be sacking their manager. However, we are going to start with the transfers. And as we can see, Juventus have only added 1 player in Rennie Adelaide from Arsenal. They paid a relatively decent fee, 10.5 million, possibly rising to 18.5 million. And they sent out a couple more of the youngsters on loan in Ruggiero and Mandragora. As we head to the competitions, we can see that they're through to the first knockout round of the Champions League, where they'll face Leverkusen, 5th round of the FA Cup against West Brom, and unfortunately for Juventus, they did get knocked out of the quarter-final of the FL Cup by Crystal Palace, who incidentally were the very first team they played in the Premier League. However, the Premier League is what this experiment is all about, so we're going to take a closer look at that. So they are currently sat in 7th on 39 points, 15 points behind Chelsea, who sit at the top of the league on 54. But as we know, we're not here to see the English teams, so we're going to concentrate on Juventus. And as I look at the player stats, there's no Juventus players there. Chiellini's down there for some bookings, but I mean from a positive perspective, unfortunately, no Juventus players feature. And as we head to take a look at the Player of the Month, the great thing is, although Juventus haven't played that well, it seems to be like maybe upon Emery coming into the team, he did get the job in January, they've started to play okay, because Gonzalo Higuain did pick up Player of the Month in December, and then Dybala picks up the Player of the Month in January. However, maybe one of Allegri's downfalls might have been the fact that he might not have been using that many youth, because they've not picked up a Young Player of the Month award throughout the whole of the first half of the season. And unsurprisingly, because of course he's been sacked, Allegri did not pick up Manager of the Month once. Not a single time. The last thing we are going to look at while we're here with Juventus at this time of year is of course the schedule, because Allegri's been sacked somewhere along the way, and we might be able to see that in these fixtures. So the first 3 fixtures we already knew about, so I'll push them off the screen, and I'm just going to scroll down. The first thing to spot is very much like the Bayern Munich experiment. No big score lines. Juventus haven't beat anyone 4 or 5-0. They've not been beaten 4 or 5-0. It's all very steady 1-2, 3-0 wins or 2-1, etc., etc. Only small, but we'll have a look. They did take a beating from Sunderland and Chelsea. They were also beaten by Palace in the FL quarter-final. We knew that. And then they got a win against Leicester. But if we look at this, they went on a 6-game streak without a win before they managed to beat Palace 2-0. And my guess is that's probably where Allegri was shown the door and Emery was brought in to replace him. So there you go, guys. That's your schedule. You can feel free to pause it, have a look through at any of the results closer if you want to. But what we're going to do now is head to the end of the season, see how Emery's got on in charge of Juventus, see if we've been able to improve their league position. And of course, we'll check out all the Player of the Months, Manager of the Months, and of course, a Player of the Year towards the end of the season to see how Juventus have done. So here we are then. We're on June the 10th. The Premier League season is all done and dusted. And I think considering their rocky start and where Emery walked in, finishing 6th is probably a decent position. Now, bearing in mind the whole experiment was to see whether they could come in and dominate the Premier League. Obviously, on this occasion, that's not been the case. But let's go take a look at the competitions and see how they got on anyway. So if we take a look at it, they were knocked out in the quarter-final of the Champions League by Real Madrid. Real Madrid then went on to win the competition. Maybe one of their best achievements of the season was finishing runners-up in the FA Cup. They got to the final where they lost against Liverpool. And of course, we already knew they were out of the FL Cup. But we are here about the Premier League, so let's go take a closer look at that. So the Premier League, they managed to finish 6th on 69 points, but they were still 15 points behind the winners, Arsenal. However, what is quite nice to see, because let's be honest, it's been a little bit doom and gloom this experiment when we've come to watch Juventus, is that Higuain did finish the Premier League's top goal scorer. He managed to grab 20 goals, which is pretty good going. But once again, with the exception of Chiellini showing up on the yellow cards at the bottom there, no other Juventus players featured in the player stats. So as we go to the Player of the Month awards from February onwards, it was only ever Gonzalo Higuain who's picked up another Player of the Month award. He did it in May. He obviously had quite a good month. He managed to get 3 appearances and 3 goals. Average rating of 8.43, which is absolutely ridiculous. And again, in the Young Player of the Month, no Juventus players featuring. But Unai Emery, in basically his second month in the job, he came into the job in January, and then in February did something that Allegri didn't manage to do, and he did pick up a Manager of the Month award. I did go through the rest of the yearly awards, and the only one where any Juventus players featured, which is a bit of a surprise when we consider that he didn't actually feature in any of the Young Player of the Month awards, was the fact that Paulo Dybala won Players Young Player of the Year award. He managed 38 appearances, 16 goals, 9 assists with a 7.67 average rating. Higuain, Bonucci and Dani Alves all featured in the Players Team of the Year. And that's it. That's all the awards done out of the way. One last thing that we are going to do before we end this experiment is we're just going to go and have a quick look at the schedule and see if there was any shock results in the second half of the season. So here we are then. I've just scrolled the schedule down to the second half of the season so we can see what's gone on. And it has to be said, since Emery came in, he's actually done quite a grand job. I mean, okay, I think it looks like they went on a little bit of a bad run as they got later on in this season, but they did suffer a loss to Middlesbrough. But prior to that, Emery hadn't been beaten. As we know, he came in at some point in January after this bad run of form up here, and then it must be 15, 20 games, not lost a single one. He then got beat by Middlesbrough at home 1-0. Real Madrid knocked them out of the Champions League after a 1-1 draw at home, and then they got beat 2-1 away. And then it wasn't until the final 2 games of the season where Tottenham beat them in the Premier League, and of course Liverpool beat them in the FA Cup final. So there we go then, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little experiment. It's just a bit of fun, that's all it is. It's not serious, it's never going to happen, but it was just to see whether or not Juventus could cut it in the Premier League. And I would honestly say on this occasion, 5 out of 10, I would say they can do okay. I really expected a little bit more from them. But of course, with Allegri getting moved on, Emery coming in, maybe they'd have done better if we ran the whole experiment again. But on this occasion, it wasn't the case. So if you've enjoyed today's video, guys, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps the channel out tremendously. There's loads of great content coming out on Scout every single day. So if you subscribe, you'll be able to keep up with all that. And of course, don't forget to check out fmscout.com, the website, where you'll find all the latest news, views, tactics, graphics, you name it, it's all on there. Other than that, guys, I've been Teach FM, and I'll catch you later. See you in a bit.